Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of council, administration, those that are joining us in chambers, and those that are watching through the town's live stream. Welcome to our council meeting for Tuesday, November 14th. Just before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the Stony Plain Legion Branch 256 for running and hosting the Remembrance Day ceremony that was at Heritage Park on Saturday. It was a full house at the Heritage Park Pavilion, and it's great to see so many people out to support and just kind of thank our veterans for the services and the sacrifices that they made for our communities. Members of council, there is an agenda before you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you. The Town Council adopt the November 14th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. Administration, anything to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to number 3 of our agenda is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to talk about anything that's not on the current agenda. Administration, has anybody registered?
Through your worship, no one has registered.
Okay, seeing none, is there anybody in the gallery who would like to speak to council on anything that's not on the current agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on with our agenda. Number 4 is presentations and delegations. There's nothing scheduled tonight. There's also no statutory public hearings. So moving on straight to adoption of council minutes, 6.1 and 6.2. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council approve the October 23rd, 2023 organizational meeting and regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, you have the opportunity to review them. Any errors, omissions, or questions on those council minutes? I do not see any either, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to number 7, which is council boards and committee minutes, 7.1 and 7.2. Councilor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council received the board and committee meetings for information.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Members of council, there's 7.1 and 7.2, and that's the TLC minutes from September 14th and the Meridian Housing Foundation from October 6th. Any questions or comments regarding those minutes? Okay, I do not have any myself, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's accepted. Moving on to number 8, which is bylaws. Going back to 8.1 is the traffic bylaw. This has been brought back to council after we tabled it a little while ago in October. Go ahead, administration.
Your Worship, Council, we have a quick presentation just to summarize the report that's in your agenda this evening. So the status of this current bylaw is on August 28th, we received first reading from council. We did bring the bylaw back one additional time, and we had to do some further work on it, and by recommendation of council, and we're back this evening, November 14th, for second and third reading potential. And once we do get the second and third reading, we would then implement the bylaw. When we reviewed the bylaw from first reading to this evening's meeting, we looked at some desired outcomes as a result of the bylaw. Clear and easy to navigate, whether that be a CPO out on the street or public member looking to understand what they can and can't do with respect to the bylaw. It's fair, reasonable, and enforceable. It limits confusion and interpretation between the bylaw and the current legislation, as our healthy and robust discussion at the last meeting. There's some discrepancy and some restriction with current legislation with the Traffic Safety Act and municipalities' ability to put bylaws in and capture what's currently happening in communities. So we're looking to ensure that we can limit that confusion. Looking to look at behaviors from our residents versus what they're using with the behavior. So as an example, we've talked about e-scooters quite a bit. We understand how that fits into provincial legislation. We do understand that those will continue to be utilized in our community. And it's how are people using them versus what is the device that they're on. so we can enforce the behavior. Sometimes it's more challenging with current legislation and our bylaw to enforce the specific item that they're using versus the behavior. And responsive to community actions. So administration did review traffic bylaws from across the Metro region, and the report does include the communities that we did look at, and we also looked at some larger communities, as often they are looking at the e-device component specifically in a different way, in a different manner of which we would. We looked at the current legislation related to the bylaw, Traffic Safety Act, the MGA, our land use bylaw for consistency, the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, and use of highway rules and road regulations. Some of the challenges that we experienced in development of this particular bylaw, the current legislation restricts devices currently being used in our community. So a prime example of that is an electric scooter. Legislation does not permit it, but there's quite a bit of use of that happening in our community. E-devices are brand new. In the last 3 to 5 years, e-devices continue to come out at rapid rates in terms of new devices being developed. They're not specifically captured by definition or as we see them today in our bylaw or the Traffic Safety Act. Common language can change and it leads to greater confusion. As an example, medical aid scooters, shortened to scooters, typically were four-wheelers. Seniors sat on them. They went very slow, but they got people around shopping centers, grocery stores. Now a scooter is something you can buy commonly in hardware stores, Costco, Canadian Tire. They can either have an electric motor on them or they can be used without a motor, and they're typically 2 wheels with a handlebar. So that's a little bit of a nuance between what some people are accustomed to a scooter being defined as and what others would define a scooter as. So depending on who you're speaking with, it could mean 2 different things to 2 different people. E-device environment evolvement will continue, and as we've seen over the past number of years, we do now have the medical aid scooters that are quite elaborate in terms of their hard body surroundings. They still are a medical aid scooter underneath, but there's more protection being provided to the user so that they're a bit more of a four-season device. Some of the devices, the e-devices that are coming up, we're not permitted to permit them through a bylaw, and the biggest one would be e-scooters. So as you're aware through first reading and previous meetings, special permission has to be given by the province in order for us to permit those to be used in our community, and that's typically through a rideshare situation. So similar to what the city of Spruce Grove has just finished undertaking and likely will continue with in the next seasons. Amendments to the Traffic Safety Act are anticipated. There was a motion at the AM, so Alberta Municipalities Conference, where Calgary and Edmonton did ask the government of Alberta to amend the Traffic Safety Act to respond to the increased use of e-devices in communities across Alberta. And I think that document is fairly old and it needs to continue to evolve and capture some of the current uses in our communities. Defining an exhaustive list of devices in the bylaw limits the enforcement flexibility. So I think we had a lot of conversation about e-scooters and specifically listing devices. It changes our ability because it's more prescriptive versus the language in the bylaw says may be or may include. That means the enforcement officer can look and say, well, it's acting like this, it looks like this, I can place it in that particular category. So under definition, I can look at the corresponding enforcement action and we can treat it in that manner. Using behavior versus specific device allows us the ability to enforce with consistency and also enforce with what we believe the community is looking for us to do, which is irresponsible behavior of a person in our community, regardless of the action. It's what is the person doing. So looking at the recommended amendments in the particular bylaw, so formatting, excuse me for that, formatting for consistency. So throughout our bylaw, Legislative Services does have a view of our bylaw and a review, and to ensure that it's meeting the current format of our bylaw specifications. Movement of sections to clarify and for ease of finding for the CPOs. So an example of that for clarity would be, we did have some conversation at first reading about spiked tracked vehicles, moving that to the commercial division versus keeping it as a standalone, because that's likely where it should be. Removal of sections that are already covered in legislation, which our Stony Plain Peace Officers are already empowered to enforce. So as a peace officer, we're given specific legislation in terms of acts that we're able to enforce. If it's captured in that, then it's a bit redundant to capture those in our bylaws. Reflection of enforcement actions consistent with communities across the region and throughout the province. So e-devices is a very tricky topic, and we try to find and put in our bylaw the best ability for us to enforce what we're seeing in the community today, and not try to react or anticipate what the Traffic Safety Act might say in the future. So really, we're looking to allow provisions in the bylaw to ensure that what's currently happening in our community is enforceable, and we're able to look at the actions of our residents in terms of the complaints that we may receive, and have some consistent and reasonable ability for us to enforce those particular actions. Language updates, so there is terminology change from time to time. As an example, when we talked about the scooter, the medical scooters, now talking mobility devices now is the new terminology. So that's more consistent with what's currently being used in other communities and other bylaws. Alignment with the current legislation. Legislation, as you're aware, legislation can change. We cannot anticipate when that may change, but certainly the current legislation is what our CPOs are permitted to enforce. So we're making sure that our bylaws do align with that particular legislation. And ensure that what we do have in the bylaw, particularly around the e-devices and other devices that might be used in the community, is looking at what's currently being used and ensuring that we do have a bylaw or a document that permits us the ability to go and enforce the activities related to the uses of those particular devices. Mr. Mayor, certainly this has been a challenging bylaw for us. There's been a lot of great discussion from council related to this particular bylaw. Really, it's been around the e-device topic and the lack of provincial definition in the Traffic Safety Act around e-devices and communities responding to that. I think both the province and ourselves are challenged with the quick evolution of things that are used in our community specific to the Traffic Safety Act and the traffic bylaw. We're able to respond a lot quicker than the provincial government is, certainly. We do have a 4-year cycle that we review our bylaws. If something pops up that we believe we need to bring before council sooner, we have the ability to bring it forward sooner. I just think with, the provincial government and all of the things that they're responsible for, sometimes it takes a little longer for a Traffic Safety Act review, as an example. So the ability for us to be a bit more flexible, and the ability for us to include clauses or things in our bylaw that permit us to enforce what's currently happening. And where we can be prescriptive, we certainly are prescriptive, but where we can't be prescriptive, we're certainly focusing on the ability for us to say, this is what it appears to be, and this is how we will enforce it, so that we've got an opportunity to try and turn the behavior around to be more positive in our community. Happy to answer any questions. We do have the CPO supervisor here, so if there's technical questions that I'm not able to handle this evening, Ms. Anderson will certainly do that also.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for providing those updates and the recommended amendments as we sent this back to administration to review. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Marr, go ahead.
Just very quickly, turning to pages 65 and 66, this is in regards to water flow. And I see so my concern is you have vehicles not driven regularly. They accumulate a certain amount of snow on them. Come a warm day, they melt off and are freeze-thaw, and an icing situation creates a bit of an ice dam from time to time, particularly on my street, but I'm sure it's not just a my street problem. So, but I do see it is addressed in 3.2.3.24.2, 3.24.8, 3.28, all seem to address these issues, and hats off to you guys to including it. My question is, as it is sort of a temporary thing, the snow melts and then eventually it goes away. In the meantime, it does impede a certain amount of water flow and drainage around town. Are these issues the type of thing that a citizen would need to report to have it addressed, or does it rise to your average enforcement officer to address?
Okay, go ahead.
Your Worship, to the Deputy Mayor. Certainly, there's several options. We do have our CPOs are going around on a daily basis through patrols, so they do generate their own files related to that. We do get complaints from the public, and we do have our Public Works Division from a snow removal perspective that certainly can identify vehicles that are there more consistently than others. So generally speaking, we do get calls from the snow removal crews about vehicles that have been there for a bit of time. We do have our CPOs who know the cycle and where we're cleaning snow, and they are certainly likely going ahead of the snow plows to ensure that there's a general compliance. There's a 72-hour requirement for people to move their vehicles. We try to get the signs out as quick as possible. For the most part, we're getting high compliance when the signs go out saying snow removal's coming, please remove your vehicles. With the ice and snow, certainly we've encountered a lot of times the sticker will go on, snow will fall, it covers the sticker up. CPOs are quite aware of their files, and if they need to, they'll go and remove the snow off the window so that the sticker is visible for people to understand that the vehicle has to be removed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just gonna piggyback on that because that question comes up quite often. Is mentioned that there's a sticker on there. If snow gets covered, the CPO will come and uncover the sticker. But is there another way of notifying the registered owner besides this a sticker? Because if they're not home or they're not there, how do they know that they are in infraction?
Your Worship, to answer that question, and it can be supplemented by Ms. Anderson if required. Typically, our CPOs do have access to databases where they can find out who the registered owner is. So they typically will try to get a hold of the registered owner, or simply go and knock on a door and ask for removal. Those that stay a little bit longer, that's treated a little bit differently. But certainly the CPOs do give a lot of grace when it comes to vehicles being moved, and they do exercise some discretion with respect to what they can have access to and how they can communicate or get a hold of someone that might own a vehicle.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hansard?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to refer us to page 70. It's the map of the truck routes in Stony Plain, and the paragraph below the maps, paragraphs, are actually bullets. Under north-south, the fourth bullet says Boundary Road from Highway 16A to Southtown Boundary. That road is not called Boundary Road anymore. Is it too late to have that changed to Veterans Boulevard?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Hanson, thank you for catching that. Certainly, that's something that we can make sure in the authorized version of the bylaw that is corrected.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Questions for clarity and understanding? Councilor Lorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Refer page 66, 3.28.0, flow of water. That speaks to occupier or owner of any premises shall permit unrestricted flow of water from such premises over any highway, sidewalk, or boulevard. Just a question of clarity on this. Obviously, we know with varying lot grading, with sump pumps, depending on water table, et cetera, there's often times in where it's unavoidable that water flow occurs from a property across a sidewalk. I'm aware of an area in town where we actually close the sidewalk over the winter because of the flow of water off those lots. Can we just get a little clarity on this? At what point does this become enforceable? Is this, as long as there's a visible effort by the property owner to control it as best as possible, using, ice melt, et cetera? Is it that, if somebody does have a sump hose that is directing it onto the sidewalk, would we actually require them to move that so that it was more onto the lawn rather than onto the sidewalk? Just looking for a little clarity. We have a high water table in our community. We see this quite often, I would say, throughout our community, and I want to get a bit of an understanding because it's one of those items that I think could very easily turn into a complaint and a neighbor dispute type of situation.
Thank you. Administration?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Lorry. This section is enforced jointly through us and the utilities crew. When we receive a complaint of this nature, we do notify the utilities crew. They will go out and assess the situation. They will make recommendations to the homeowner, whether it means that downspouts need to be moved or downspouts, other options could be put in, like a rain barrel. They work with the homeowners on that one. There is a reasonable effort considered as well. In this area, we often get melt, freeze, rain, snow, sometimes all in one day. So if a homeowner is making reasonable attempts to make sure their sidewalk is safe for people to pass through it, there is some discretion allowed to them from the officers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then just a further follow-up on that. So where we have instances in where adjacent properties impact properties further, I'll call it upstream. So for instance, when you have properties that drain towards the road and then the roadway drains in an opposite direction, if you have properties further down the way who are not taking those reasonable steps and they are causing the properties, so next thing you know, instead of one property sidewalk is covered in ice, you have 6 or 8 because they've essentially log jammed everything. What's our process for actually taking action on that to make sure that we alleviate the problem where it's occurring rather than penalizing those who are taking those efforts but can't make any progress because somebody isn't?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Lorry. The enforcement of uncleared sidewalks falls under the Community Standards Bylaw, but the process that we follow for that is our officers respond to complaints both proactively and reactively. When they're in the area, if they do see a sidewalk that's not cleared, they will enforce that particular house as well. It's not that they would just only address one particular home. If they see 4 or 5 houses that are, or in this instance, one that's upstream causing an issue, they would address that property as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to go back to the truck routes, if I might. School buses obviously don't fit strictly in the truck route category, do they? Because actually they move through all the neighborhoods of our community in order to pick children up and to drop them back off again at the end of the school day. So how does that fit? Who is best to answer that question?
Yes, that's a good question. And I think the previous one, that buses do not need to adhere to truck routes. Administration, is there the portion of the bylaw that signifies that?
Your Worship, the short answer is buses don't fall under the truck route. So they're able to be navigated through the community to do the job that they need to do to get kids to school and pick them up and take them back home.
Okay. For clarity, Your Worship, they are technically a truck, though, are they not? We just don't call them that for the purpose of them being able to do the very job for which they were created?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Hansard, they would be considered a commercial vehicle or a heavy vehicle under the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. That's also on 3.22 for commercial and heavy vehicles. So not all the trucks have to follow those truck routes. If they're in the process of doing business or delivering goods and stuff, they're allowed off those truck routes. Yep. Any other questions? Oh, page 54, I have a question in terms of, I think a lot of conversation over the last couple of times when administration brought this back was in terms of the definition of mobility devices. I like how that's all cleaned up where it says it's just about how fast you move, not the type of device. I see that, as mentioned, that e-scooters have been removed from there, but e-bikes are still there. Is that to signify that e-bikes are already regulated by the Traffic Safety Act? That's why it's still in there?
Your worship, certainly in the Traffic Safety Act, e-bikes are permitted. It's a permitted use of vehicle. So this aligns with that particular documentation.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Hansford, for second reading, please.
Your worship, I move that Town Council give second reading to Traffic Bylaw 2677G23 as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Hansford. So members of council, we've referred this back, tabled back to administration. They've come back with some changes that address quite a few of the issues that council was having a conversation about. We've asked questions for the general manager and supervisor for some clarity. Any debate on the motion? Okay, see none. I appreciate the administration bringing this back, and I appreciate council having the fulsome conversation. And I think it's very clear to me that, as mentioned earlier, that this bylaw is not to regulate certain devices as devices change rapidly and frequently, but it's about to regulate the behavior of people operating them. We'll never be able to change our bylaws fast enough to, as Councillor Petro mentioned, the next fancy dancy thing that's coming forward, but we can regulate the behavior of everybody that operates these new devices, old devices, and et cetera. So appreciate the administration hearing that from council and making those adjustments. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Deputy Mayor, please.
Yes, I move the Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2677/G/23.
Thank you. Any debate on the third reading? Call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, moving on to 8.2, which is the business bylaw update. And go ahead, administration.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Before you is a recommendation to give second and third reading to the business license bylaw 2679. Along with the updated proposed business license bylaw is a redlined version of the proposed bylaw, a summary of proposed table of changes, and the proposed fees and charges. The updated bylaw was presented on October 23rd, at which time members of council asked great questions and gave great feedback. Based on your feedback, administration has updated the bylaw to further increase clarity and understanding. Additionally, new home-based businesses will be required to get a license. The updated license types offer a variety of options for local businesses to best support their contributions to the community. Administration will continue to support new businesses to determine the appropriate license type. In closing, the updated business license bylaw is aimed to make Stony Plain more business-friendly by working with the City of Spruce Grove to streamline processes and increase clarity and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members of council, we've had this for first reading and some feedback, and we've heard some adjustments from administration. Any questions for clarity and understanding? See none. Again, thank you for bringing this back and then addressing some of the questions that council had earlier at first reading. Councillor Loynes, go ahead.
Town Council gives second reading to Business License Bylaw 2679/LIC/23 as amended.
Thank you. Members of council, debate and commentary on the motion. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I didn't necessarily prepare anything, but I thought I'd just say that I will be supporting this motion. I think the opportunity to align with Spruce Grove makes a lot of sense, as well as I'm quite happy to see the idea that so long as the business continues to stay on top of it, they will only have to pay one business license. So I think that's terrific. And I'm glad to see the town moving towards business, being business friendly.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions, comments, debate? See none? Yes, I'll echo those comments and definitely appreciate the work that our staff have done to revise the business bylaw for our community. And it does signify that Stony Plain is evolving to be a more business-friendly community. So well done. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Councillor Laurie, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2679/LIC/23.
Thank you. Any additional comments and debates on third reading? Oh, well done. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to 8.3, which is the public advertising bylaw and is coming for first reading. Go ahead, administration.
Your Worship and Council, tonight town staff are presenting the public advertisement bylaw for its first reading. Town staff aim to provide a high level of service when engaging with the public and surrounding community. Over the years, the town has utilized a number of tools and guidance from best practices and legislation in order to deliver this service. This bylaw seeks to create alignment with council and town staff and deliver on council's expectations when engaging with the public. The town supervisor of development is here tonight to provide a presentation. I will now pass it to him.
Good evening. As Mr. Newstead mentioned, I'm pleased to be presenting first reading for bylaw 2681G23, the public advertisement bylaw. So tonight I'll discuss some of the legal requirements of municipalities when performing notices or advertisements, the current process that the town is undertaking, discuss some of what other municipalities are doing in the region, and a proposed approach for this bylaw. Just for some background, changes were made to the Municipal Government Act in 2017, which provided municipalities with some more enabling powers to allow them to decide how they would perform notices and advertisements in their own communities. This allows them to tailor and perform these services based on the specific needs of the communities that they preside over. However, to leverage this power, an authorizing bylaw must be adopted. I just want to discuss exactly what is in scope for this bylaw. We have broken it out into two different categories, one being location-specific planning bylaw issues, because they have some more geographic context and specific impacts or considerations for specific areas. And then we have general statutory advertisements, which are all-encompassing town items such as bylaws, resolutions, public hearings, or other things referred to in 606 of the Municipal Government Act. And things which are out of scope would be tax auctions, capital projects, infrastructure and public works, or general community engagement or surveys at large. So I mentioned Section 606 of the Municipal Government Act in the previous slide. I just want to explain exactly what that section states. So Section 606 prescribes the method which municipalities must undertake when they are performing advertisements or notices for bylaws, resolutions, meetings, public hearings, or other items which would be similar. So it's an or list which means that one of these things would satisfy the requirement. The municipality must either post in the newspaper, mail to properties in the area of the item, or direct how they will perform notices through a bylaw. So you can see that mailing to properties in the area of an item is rather vague and interpretive, and this bylaw would help clarify how we plan to undertake those mailouts. Here's a summary of our current process that we are undertaking, specific to planning bylaw amendments. So prior to the public hearing, we advertise twice in the Stony Plain Reporter for 2 consecutive weeks. The item is posted on the town's website. A mailout is completed, which is loosely based on a 90 to 300 meter radius. This is not a standard or it does not come from any specific regulation, but it has been a common practice in the town. A sign is required to be posted prominently on the site. This was newly introduced this year. And the item is also referred to the planning advisory for comments, which those comments are included in the agenda package before a public hearing. For general items, what's currently being done is that an advertisement is done in the Stony Plain Reporter once a week for 2 consecutive weeks. And the item is posted on the town's website, and occasionally some other methods are leveraged, such as social media. So I mentioned signs being posted on site as a new item, so I just wanted to bring that to the attention of council. This was a new process that we introduced. It is it's a requirement for a redistricting application. However, the burden of placing the sign on the site is that of the developer. The town specifies the requirements and what information have to be posted on the site and gives some direction about where maybe the sign should be located, and the developer is responsible for posting it. Yes. So I'll discuss a little bit about what some of the other municipalities in the region are currently doing. You can see those which are tailoring or regulating this process through a bylaw have been noted there in green. One thing to note is that the majority of these municipalities are no longer performing mailouts for these items, but have really relied on their websites for the method of notice. There are some which are continuing to perform mailouts. You'll see the city of Edmonton there performs them at 60-meter radius, and I believe it's Sturgeon County does mailouts to adjacent landowners. So to discuss the process that this bylaw proposes, for general advertisements that would be done, which are town-wide in nature, an advertisement would be done in the Stony Plain Reporter once, and the item would be posted on the town's website. And the bylaw does allow for other optional methods to be leveraged, should administration deem it may be beneficial. And for location-specific planning bylaw issues, the bylaw proposes a tiered approach where it would have both standard or advanced processes. And the standard process would be to ensure the notice sign is posted on site, the planning advisory committee is notified and provides comments, and the item will be posted on the website. This would be in situations where a neighborhood level planning document, such as an area structure plan or area redevelopment plan, has already been passed through bylaw by council, which designates that area for urban development. And the advanced process would, similarly as the standard, have a notice sign, a referral to the planning advisory committee, a website post, however, would also contain a mail out to landowners at a 90-meter radius. And this would be for situations where an amendment is proposed to an area structure plan or an area redevelopment plan, or an entirely new area structure plan is being proposed, meaning that that area had not been previously slated for urban development, and as such, we would be performing mailouts to further notify the public. So I wanted to kind of just let us sit in that, that thought between advanced and standard for a moment, and show this slide, which we often use for land use planning matters at the town. Shows a cross-section, essentially, of the different levels and hierarchy of planning documents that exist. So in this proposed bylaw, if this level of the neighborhood design was being affected, that would fall under the advanced category, which would trigger a mail-out to nearby landowners. That is because it's at this time when land or area is being designated for urban development. At this stage, that designation has already happened, and it's more to deal with the specific types or rules and regulations about the kind of development that will take place. And that is why the standard approach would be applied for this level of the hierarchy. So we have some graphics to show and get a visual representation so that you can understand exactly what that radius might entail. This example in particular would look at a developing quarter section and demonstrate exactly who might be notified. So you can see the different radiuses there. 60 meters in pink, 90 in blue, 150 in yellow, and 300 in green. We want to present another image which shows perhaps what a redistricting might look like on an already established or developed area, because the lotting, the size of the lot does dramatically change how many properties might be notified. So again, you can see in this situation, 60 meters in pink, 90 in blue, 150 in yellow, and 300 in green, and the subject site being here in the middle, of course. So just to summarize exactly what the bylaw proposes, for general statutory advertisements, there would be a newspaper ad to capture the entire town audience, and one website post, a living website post that would be there up until the item was resolved. For planning bylaws, where an approved neighborhood level plan exists, a notice sign would be posted on site, there will be a website post and a referral to the Planning Advisory Committee. And for planning bylaws where no neighborhood level plan exists, or there would be a change or a new neighborhood level plan being introduced, there would be a notice sign, a website post, referral to the Planning Advisory Committee, and a mail out to landowners at 90 meters radius. So provided council's blessing at first reading tonight, administration would proceed with advertising for a public hearing for this bylaw using the standard process that we have currently established, and would look to advertise for the public hearing on December 11th. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, administration, for the presentation and some of the rationale in terms of changes to the public advertising bylaw. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, admin, for presentation. We've got two specific items that I want to ask some questions for clarity on. The first is around the signs, the planning notice signs. I think they've been a fantastic addition. I think we've seen a couple examples of them used. They've been very, very beneficial. What I didn't realize is that these were the developer's responsibility, and that it was up to the developer to essentially procure them and place them that. Just wondering, in respect to the old process, and I guess the current process, is the developer also responsible for the mail out, or was the developer previously responsible for the newspaper advertisement?
Through your worship to Councillor Lowry. So no, the developer was not previously responsible for the town's advertisement of a public hearing, nor were they responsible for the newspaper advertisement. That was always the town's responsibility and continues to be such. Occasionally, depending on the context, there may be developer-driven engagement before the application even comes to administration, and they might engage landowners through mailouts or door knocking and other means.
Right, thank you for the clarity on that, but just to be clear, those would be things that would be by choice of the developer. There was no requirement by the planning department or the town of Stony Plain of anything that the developer had to undertake in relation.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, there is currently a requirement that a developer engage with administration to discuss what kinds of engagement they should be performing, and town staff gives them some guidance there. So what we would be looking to do is aligning the two. While developer-driven engagement is not part of this bylaw, it deals with how a municipality must perform advertisement. Administration would look to align the procedure in the bylaw and essentially expect the developer to engage at the same level that the municipality plans to later on in the process. I believe that's the question.
Okay, thank you. And so then I'll just follow up on that. So when, in our previous processes, we've heard the developer was not responsible for the mail out, or the developer was not responsible for the newspaper ad. That was a town of Stony Plain responsibility. That was under our expenses. Shifting to the use of the signs, we're shifting that responsibility onto the developer. We are providing them with a template, but it's not clear that there's a mandate that they use that template. I'm just wondering, would that not be something that would be better off kept under our control so that we could ensure that there was consistency, we could ensure that they were, the content was everything that was pertinent and that was required, we would ensure that they were placed in appropriate locations, we would ensure that they were out there for the appropriate durations, and then also just from a standpoint of simple making sure that we're not wasting anything, that we're able to reuse these as we work with different developers throughout the community, rather than having every developer having to go out and source their own. I'm just wondering if that was a consideration that we thought of.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, the operational, I guess, process or service of administration being responsible to print and install signage is not a consideration of the bylaw in particular. The requirement to have developers place the signage on site is relatively new, I'd say, for the town. The few examples that we do have were very successful. We have not seen any opposition to developers using the template that we prescribe. It is posted on our website and is a clear expectation of the application that they post a sign on site which the town administration has approved. So far, we believe the process to be successful as it exists, being developer burden and town reviewed or town providing feedback. However, it's early, and we're always interested in observing how the process evolves over time.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that's, you hit a key word there that was what stuck out in my mind. It's developer burden. Looking at this from the lens of trying to be development friendly, trying to work with our developers, trying to encourage them and not, put up the red tape or the roadblocks, those type of things. Just wondering if that's something that, is an opportunity for improvement on this, as to where we can work with the developer a little bit more so that they don't hit any speed bumps. I think the process we have is good. I would agree it has worked very well. I will say, for example, the one sign on Veterans Boulevard, though, was there for weeks, if not months, beyond when it needed to be. I couldn't have told you why. And so, I'm just not sure if that's something that may in the future start to crop up a little more and cause concern, but maybe just some food for thought. I do have one other, Your Worship, but happy to let it go around the horn and you can come back to me.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The questions and the comments. We'll go to Councillor Hansard now.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Planning Department. I'm curious if the developer is handling all the notifications and they get feedback, how does the town get apprised, and more so, how does council then get apprised that there has been feedback, positive or negative, on something?
Administration.
Through your worship to Councillor Hansard. So I want to make sure that we're not conflating the two. This bylaw does not in any way prescribe or speak to developer engagement whatsoever. This bylaw prescribes how the administration will notify the public for many different items, planning bylaws being one of them, but also statutory advertisements at large that could happen for various different meetings, resolutions, things of that nature. Developer-driven engagement will continue to be an application requirement for planning bylaws. What administration will look to do is tailor that engagement based on what this public advertisement bylaw will require as far as notice further down the line. So let's say the bylaw says to mail out at a 90-meter radius, then administration is going to expect engagement from a developer at a 90-meter radius as well, so that we're not getting situations where perhaps the developer notified the next door neighbors only, and then later on the process, more people got letters. We want the same groups to being engaged throughout. So I understand that they are related, but I want to make sure that we're clear what we're talking about. This is administration's responsibility to notify.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, and that's a good question. Just make sure that we are aware that the town is not giving up that the right or ability to do the mails and the newspaper advertisement. So all that still refers the response to readdress the planning department. So before it comes to a public hearing or a bylaw review, that will be included in all the documentation that we have received. So it's not asking the developer to do that. It is still our responsibility. Any other questions for clear understanding before I go back? Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. This next one centers around the statutory and the proposal, which includes the advertisement done on the Stony Plain Reporter once. The question revolves around the longevity of the Stony Plain Reporter. The reality is we have seen this once weekly publication go through many iterations over the last while of being a fulsome and regular service to being a very limited service. I've also heard significant reports, and I'm very well aware that many residents in the town of Stony Plain don't even receive the publication, even though it is still printed and available as a once per week publication. I'm wondering if it's justifiable to continue to have this in here as a requirement, thinking down the road of, do we believe that this publication will exist within the next 4 years when this bylaw would theoretically be up for review again? When we look at the other optional methods available, such as social media, which is said here, but the town also has the portable message boards that we have stationed throughout the community and those type of things. I'm wondering, is the inclusion of the reporter and the statutory advertisements something that maybe should be included in the optional methods rather than as a requirement, in the light that it may not be something we are physically able to accomplish within the next 4 years?
Thank you. And just members of council, that is page 125. If you want to follow along, it's just easier to have that conversation. Go ahead, administration.
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie. So I'll note a couple things. The typical review schedule for a bylaw would usually be 4 years. For this bylaw, because it's a brand new bylaw being passed by council potentially, we scheduled it for a 1 year review. And that would be to perhaps flesh out some of those details and insights that you just mentioned. There is also a provision within the bylaw which states that if a newspaper is not in regular circulation within the town, that the website post does meet our requirements for providing notice and advertising. So even if the reporter would to, for some reason, become more irregular or not effective, we would still be meeting our legislative requirements. But again, I think we'd be interested to see how things evolve over the next year, and that's definitely something that we could bring to public hearing if it's desired. I can tell you that anecdotally, an advertisement in the Stony Plain Reporter, black and white, moderately sized, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 to $300 per ad. Our previous practice was to run the ad 2 times, so obviously double that. So that would be the cost that you're typically looking at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Loynes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, in regards to page 126, where we talk about the advanced notice, and we talk about the 90 meters, can you just explain to me why we're proposing a change in the meter radius from what we currently offer? Because when you look at maps on page 128 and 129, obviously 90 meters reaches very different areas, depending on if it's a vacant area versus a residential area.
Through your worship to Councillor Loynes. So we are in effect not changing anything. There is no established practice for the radius. It's loosely based right now on somewhere in between 90 and 300 meters, which is a very large difference, and it is rather subjective and case by case. So there really isn't an established practice. This would seek to clarify that and make it very specific. 90 meters in particular was one of the items considered because it effectively captures some of the most impacted areas. So I've put this image back up on the screen to show, so we'd be speaking about this light blue circle or radius there. What you're doing is you're certainly capturing the property across the street, and you're also capturing the entire block essentially, or the next house in that block moving to the east, and similarly move in the opposite direction. So the idea was to try to capture the block across the street and make sure that they're being notified. So that was the intent and the rationale behind the radius there.
Follow up.
Thank you, Your Worship. And then going up to your other map on page 128 then. Because that's a vacant area, undeveloped, where do you start your 90-meter marker from?
Through your worship to Councillor Loynes. So this, essentially the radius is extended from the property line itself. So each point moving along this line, there's an extension of 90 moving directly parallel to that line, and that's who would be notified.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, just I'll piggyback on that line of questioning. In terms of the recommendation of 90 meters, what is I think you mentioned earlier, what is the legislative requirement based on the MGA?
Thank you, Worship. The legislative requirement based on Section 606 of the Municipal Government Act is to notify landowners in the area of the item. In the area.
Right, so it's not prescribed, so.
Correct.
And that's why I saw on some of the other documentation that was provided that the City of Edmonton does 60 meters?
That's correct.
Okay, Councillor Pletchko.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I want to piggyback on that as well, because when I looked at page 128 and I seen the oddball diagram, it goes back to many times when we sit here in council and we have people in front of us wanting to know why they were not included. And it still leaves me to look at this and go, why are we not included? When I look at the roadways that are affected, you look at one end, and let's just go to the bottom of the map where the bigger circle is at the bottom, which would be, yep, right down there. If you actually squared that up, it would take into consideration the full road route that appears to be traveled by most people. Now, I get we're going to get a lot of opinions based off of that, but at the same time, if you look at the bottom of that map, you catch 3 of the houses at the bottom on the far, would be to my right where I'm sitting, correct, where you are there, and yet you touch none of the other people that are directly affected. And I've sat here many, many times and everybody goes, why were we not invited to the table as well? So help me to understand why the clarity, and I can appreciate what you've said to date. And I can appreciate that there is nothing really in the MGA that is specific to it. But just for our local residents, how could we make it so that it's more conducive to everybody being informed?
Through your worship to Councillor Palechko. So the bylaw does specify the radius and also in consideration of natural and physical boundaries. So this would allow administration to perhaps extend the boundary that we would be, performing those notices to include some of those more obvious type lots that, because of the nature of a hard line at a certain radius, it may capture just a small corner of some lot, and there may be others which it would make sense to send notices to. So well spotted. So what that would allow us to do is say, because these few lots are being included here, and there's a very clear natural boundary running north-south here, we would include these lots in that section and provide notice to them as well.
Thank you. Follow-up? All right, any more questions for clarity and understanding? I have a question in terms of the sign. So, based on page 126, so we need a standard is a notice sign. So my question is, in terms of working with the developer, how long does the notice sign have to be out and visible prior to a public hearing or prior to a bylaw change?
Thank you, Your Worship. The expectation is that the developer, the landowner, is expected to post the sign immediately following first reading. So they're working on the sign and sending us drafts of the proofs essentially before sending it to printing, leading up to first reading of a bylaw, and they are expected to post it immediately following first reading.
Okay, so they're expected to place immediately after or as soon as possible. What happens if they don't post for 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Thank you, Worship. So in that case, they would not be in compliance with the public advertisement bylaw. They would also be not meeting their application requirements in order to proceed with attending a public hearing for their item. And we would work with the developer to ensure that it gets posted immediately.
Okay. So from what I'm understanding, if that does not meet, if this bylaw goes through, if a developer does not meet the compliance, then from what I'm hearing is that that public hearing will be pulled and scheduled for another date until the developer meets those requirements.
To Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments for clarity? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I've also focused on the sign. I'm just curious if, just taking the example presented here tonight, there are a number of changes, but it only lists the specific listed uses in the R5 district. So I'm curious, why those other districts wouldn't be sort of outlined, and if administration thinks that maybe there's an opportunity there to inform the public of what some of the districts mean.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Meyer. So, this in particular sign, which was used as an example, was for rezoning, which was very specific to the R5 itself, and introducing the R5 to an area as well as zero lot lines. And so the information which was most essential and crucial to the public was those. The parks area, while it is part of this application, is not the immediate impact that a neighboring resident is going to feel. If anything, that's a benefiting kind of a quality to the development. And so what they really need to understand is the development rights that are changing and how that might affect them. So that was the driving force behind this sign. Of course, though, we would be interested to continually hear feedback about what kinds of information we want to have on this template. It's by no way rigid. It can be changed and adopted and changed over time as we get more feedback, and introducing or adding additional information about the other uses or zones proposed is certainly something we could do.
Councilor Meyer, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, so I appreciate that answer, and I also appreciate the idea of administration being able to customize the sign. Listening to your answer, you know, I could potentially see too much information being on a sign, and then it. So my follow-up question is, who then helps determine which bit of information is going to be the pressing information that needs to be on the sign?
Okay, go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, administration would work very closely with the developer to guide what information we expect to see on these signs. We would be most concerned with ensuring that anything that's going to affect the use and enjoyment of nearby residents and landowners' use of their lots is the most crucial information that should be on the sign. And would really be context specific. We could be talking about a lot of different things and a lot of different redistrictings, but really we're going to try to capture the intent and the real soul of what is being proposed and make sure that that's being advertised to the public.
So then just a comment, if I could, on that. Just something for you guys to consider when you do set the guidelines. You might help, we often get the negative responses. And looking at this, I would say you've definitely outlined, what people would be most concerned about. But it also, it's nice to hear people who are in favor of. And so that we don't get a one-sided view of the project, I would encourage, whilst I would want the administration to continue to make the decision, I would encourage them to maybe be more liberal with what could be on there.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Any other questions for clear understanding? Councilor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and maybe just some follow-ons. Appreciate some of the comments from fellow colleagues here on the signs, and that the one thing that instantly popped into my head when Councillor Meyer was talking about the sign was, it's required to be posted on the town's website, which likely would have more detail. So a QR code or a link to the website as a part of that sign, I think would be a fantastic option, because with signs, the more information you put on them, the harder they become to read, the less likely people are to read them. If it's, got the clear and obvious bullet points, and then it has an opportunity for people to access more information, I think that's there. Again, just kind of going back to the timeline and what happens if they do, what happens if they don't. A premise of a bylaw is a bylaw must be enforceable, and it must have those actions taken on it. And unfortunately, reading this, it does seem to be missing. It does not seem to really state, that notice sign must be erected within X time period. That notice sign must remain on site for X time period. It doesn't speak to how that notice sign complies with the signage regulations in other parts of our bylaws, and so on and so forth. That's where I go back to kind of if it's under the town's control versus under the developer's control. There's a little bit different there too. The other side of it is if it is under the developer's control, there actually in this bylaw is no noted deficiency or penalty. And so, to say that the developer's public hearing couldn't go forward because they hadn't met this, I mean, as long as that sign's posted the day before the public hearing, theoretically, by the way this bylaw reads, they have met it. And so maybe just some feedback as we look towards second and third reading on this as to how we can shore that up to make sure if it is in fact developers' responsibilities, there's some clear and obvious guidelines and outcomes and actions if those aren't met, or like maybe that review as to whether that would be something better undertaken, similar to the way we undertake the website and the mail outs and those type of things.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the comments from members of council. So administration, that's page 114 of 160. I think it goes under the bylaw proposed is 2.5.0, which is the notice sign. I think we're looking for a little more clarity and understanding on that. because it doesn't address some of the questions we asked about the timelines, when does it have to be out there. So a little bit more clarity on that section would give council a little more comfort that if it did not get out there ASAP, as mentioned, and the response by yourself was that then they're not compliant, but the compliant doesn't say the time frame to be up there. Like the day before the public hearing is still compliant based on this bylaw.
Thank you, Worship. So we can work with our partners in legislative services to see if there is a need to add enforcement provisions to the bylaw. Currently, the way it's being handled is that that sign is an application requirement, and part of their application requirements to move forward in the process. So that's where the enforcement lever kind of exists, but it's certainly something that we will explore with legislative services.
Thank you. Any other questions for clear understanding? Okay, thank you, Administration, for bringing this forward, and definitely for first reading of the members of council. As mentioned by Administration, that this will provide a little bit of clarity for ourselves and for our developers in the community of what is expected of them if they choose to move forward in terms of subdivision developments and changes to our community. I look forward to hearing feedback from our residents as this goes out to a public hearing, which will be dated for December 11th. So Councillor Palechko with a motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council give first reading to public advertisement bylaw 2681/G/23 and authorize administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a public hearing to be held on December 11th, 2023 for bylaw 2681/G/23.
Thank you, Councillor Palechko. Members of council, the motion is on there to accept as first reading, which we typically do, and the next authorize administration to go ahead and notify the public. Any questions, comments, and debate on that motion? See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And looking at an agenda and the time, let's take a recess before we come back to item 9.1. About 15 minutes, please. Thank you. Right, members of council, administration, and those that are participating in the gallery and watching through the town's live stream, welcome back. Joining our agenda at number 9, which is 9.1 under business items, and is the highway development strategy. As members of council are aware, and those that have been following along, council approved a highway strategy development plan, just looking at what we can do with Highway 16A and Highway 628. Looking forward to the presentation and some of the points or stuff that we can focus and look towards into our future. Go ahead, administration.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Tonight, I am excited to be presenting a summary of the Highway Development Strategy. The website link for the final recommendations report, including all the appendices, was previously shared with council via email. We also shared it again with the agenda package tonight. I want to acknowledge the teams from V3, Companies of Canada, Location Strategies, and Attraction Investment Canada for their work on the project. Tonight, we are recommending that Town Council accept the Highway Development Strategy as information. The presentation summary will include an overview of the project purpose, the project timeline, the shared vision for the strategy, key research that formulated insights in the strategic framework, and 2024 priorities identified in the Economic Development Work Plan. The Highway Development Strategy is our roadmap that will guide the future planning and actions required to attract new investment to positively impact the future assessment of properties located within the Highways 16A and 628 corridors. The highway development strategy is not a detailed action plan including budget requirements or key performance indicators or an in-depth study of local issues related to individual areas within the study area. The study area highlighted in gray on the screen is approximately 1,240 hectares of land, which is about 33% of town. Future land uses include lands designated to attracting businesses that will bring new jobs to the community, urban development that supports value-added agriculture, diversification of ag-related enterprise, and future residential development specifically along the 628 corridor. There are currently 8 area structure plans approved for the lands located in the study area. Services exist in all developed areas, but are limited in areas that are not currently developed. Highway 16A is classified as a highway through the study area with 6 access points from developed areas into the highway. Highway 628 is classified as a highway on the east end of the study area, but transitions to an arterial road as it moves west. The highway development strategy kicked off in 2022 and took the year to complete 3 phases of research, engagement, and analysis. This past year was solely dedicated to synthesizing the vast and comprehensive information gathered in the 2022 work to draft the strategic framework and our next steps. The communications and engagement plan was drafted in consultation with the town's public participation policy. The purpose of the engagement was to communicate information and the progress of the project, to understand and garner insight, and to create a strategy informed by those who do business, work, and have a vested interest in the long-term prosperity of the town. 11 different stakeholder groups were provided feedback through an online survey, in-person group sessions, and one-on-one interviews. Ongoing information was shared on the town's website. Notable input and observations garnered through stakeholder engagement formed several key themes around growth. We heard that it costs less to do business in Stony Plain, and that being the gateway to the west comes with great advantage to businesses. Stakeholders said we are creative in the different approaches we use to support business and development, and we have good collaboration with our partners. Accessing and retaining skilled labor, quality suppliers, and the availability of serviced land are noted as challenges. The importance of leveraging our networks was mentioned several times, including increasing our volume of marketing and aligning with businesses. Our stakeholders have indicated that growth is on the horizon as many of their clients intend to expand in the future. However, the lack of planned areas, serviced land, high-speed infrastructure, and the close proximity competition is seen as barriers to growth. The current businesses offer a diverse range of amenities to employee needs. The daily traffic count on Highway 16A is seen as an advantage to site location along this corridor. FDI, or foreign direct investment, is defined as an investment made by a company or individual in one country into business interests located in another country. The research tells us that FDI is instrumental in driving economic growth, creating jobs, and fostering innovation across a variety of sectors. The FDI analysis covered the province of Alberta and the Edmonton metropolitan region. The data tells us Alberta is at the forefront in attracting foreign direct investment, and the Edmonton region represents about 1/3 of that investment. The key sectors seeing an influx in FDI in Alberta include software and IT services, business services, and renewable energy projects from the US, United Kingdom, India, Germany, and Italy. In the past 3 years, 18 FDI projects landed in the Edmonton region. These projects were valued at nearly $800 million capital expenditure and created just over 2,000 new jobs. The industrial equipment sector led the investment growth. However, the consumer product sector was the leading producer of jobs. The U.S. led the FDI investment growth in Edmonton, in the Edmonton region, followed by the United Kingdom and India. A significant element of the highway development strategy was the identification and recommendation of target sectors. The strategy identifies 3 key sectors for the town to focus on within the highway corridors: agribusiness, manufacturing, and logistics and professional services. Agribusiness refers to the agriculture production, processing, and distribution of agricultural products such as food, fiber, fuels, and other goods. The target subsectors within agribusiness are controlled environment agriculture, agri-tech, and food and beverage manufacturing and processing. The manufacturing sector plays a pivotal role in economic development and investment attraction by contributing to job creation, technological innovation, and overall economic growth. Manufacturing is incredibly versatile and generally involves transforming raw materials into finished goods that are used by consumers, businesses, and other industries. The target subsectors within manufacturing are construction products, manufacturing technology, and sportswear. The logistics sector encompasses the transportation, warehousing, and distribution of goods and services across different regions and markets. Given the growing demand for products and the rapid expansion of e-commerce, this sector will continue to be in high demand. Professional services refers to a broad category of specialized knowledge-intensive services provided by trained professionals such as accountants, lawyers, engineers, as well as consultants and other experts. The services provided are crucial to supporting the growth and development of businesses, industries, and communities. The target subsectors in logistics and professional services are regional distribution hub, warehousing, and road logistics. The strategy recommends a series of initiatives to create a conducive environment for economic development aimed at attracting targeted sector investments. The strategic framework focuses on 3 foundational goals that contain corresponding objectives and tactics: investment readiness, land and infrastructure, and investment attraction. Investment readiness will guide activities to improve the overall business climate in Stony Plain and welcome new or expanding businesses with open arms. This means building on our soft landing support services. Economic development will work proactively with other departments and external agencies to guide projects through the municipal process. We will operate with the realization that time is money for business owners, and we are willing to cut through red tape. Continuing to build on a relationship with Edmonton Global and similar partners will enable us to foster a pro-business attitude. Land and infrastructure relates to the need for strategic infrastructure investments to open up and increase connectivity to development lands within the corridors. Businesses looking to establish their presence in the market will seek out sites that are development ready. Building our internal capacities while working with our development partners to establish these sites will support target sector growth. Investment attraction will enhance our marketing tactics and focus activities to maximize investment in the target sectors through lead generation campaigns. This work will include designing a robust investment attraction toolkit and implementing a face-to-face strategy through stakeholder relation meetings and trade shows or conferences in coordination with traditional marketing mediums such as web, social, and print. The highway development creates a foundation for focused and aligned discussions regarding the creation of an action plan that will increase development and assessment within the study area. We will further engage stakeholders to identify and prioritize the actions moving the strategy forward to our desired future state of development along the highway corridors. The action planning will include detailed initiatives, timeline, budget, strategic partners, and key performance indicators. Additional priorities for 2024 are development of target sector profiles and an associated marketing campaign. Formalizing a soft landing service through policy and procedural development that will focus efforts and resources on a single point of entry for businesses. Further collaboration with stakeholders to review the land use bylaw as it relates to target sectors, the infill policy in relation to future development incentives, and our organization's digital infrastructure to enable and support expediting permits and licenses. The Highway Development Strategy will position the town of Stony Plain as a thriving and dynamic economic hub along the Highway 16A and 628 corridors, renowned for investment readiness, sustainable development, and a diversified economic base. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your presentation, and definitely there is a lot to digest in the presentation and also the final report and recommendations that has been sent to council. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just unfamiliar with the phrase soft landing, and you used it several times. I'm wondering if you just explain that for me.
Your Worship, through you to answer Deputy Meyer's question and all of council. In soft landing could be referred to as sort of that initial point of contact within the organization. So we currently do that where we have businesses or potential new investors who will contact us in economic development, and we will work them and walk them through the process of opportunities for development in the community. And should they decide to invest in the community, then we help to facilitate the process through the planning and development phases that are required to kind of bring their business or their development to fruition.
Yep. Councilor Pletch, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through to the administration. I really appreciated this report. Read it 2 and almost 3 times. But as I went through this report, all I could think of was the lack of land that we really truly have. When you talk about the opportunities within our community, and we talk about opportunities for diversification, for our tax base, and a number of things. So I'm looking for a little bit of clarity. We talked about the study areas. So I'm referring to the solid gray areas that you have that kind of highlight some areas that we would have development along main corridors. It says 33.7% of the town's 1,240 hectares of land that is approximately available. I'm wondering, of that, what is actually available to a developer if he was in need of development land that is not already developed?
Okay. Go ahead.
Through your worship, to answer Councillor Pletcho's question, I actually don't have that exact number with me tonight, but I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards.
And part of that goes back to when I look at this, I would say here at Stony Plain, there is not 1 ounce of these properties that we should be giving up to anything other than industrial development within our region for our town, because it's pretty diverse. It's very limited to the amount of people that we can actually subsidize our tax base with a little bit off of the business type. And yet then I look to see where there is opportunity for possibly the town to develop. And I'm just wondering if that has been, I couldn't see that anywhere in this either, where there would be specific areas within our community that we may be able to attract or get somebody to actually build industrial property that would be reflective of more opportunities within our community to be more diverse.
Your Worship, to answer Councillor Palecho's question, that is the ultimate goal of this strategy, is to take the work and the research that was compiled in the strategy and really unpack it to identify the full opportunity of what can be developed for non-residential assessment, increase in creating jobs along that highway corridor specifically of 16A and 628. So there is definitely some work to do on our end to further realize what the opportunities are for that non-residential assessment.
I appreciate that, because as I look to the east a little bit, I see that they have a ton of that in their community that helps to offset a number of things. And yet here we have, some opportunity, I think, to be able to expand and use what is currently developable. And I think that's some of the things that I would look forward to coming out of this report is what is available, not what's developed already, but what's available to develop, so that we can look at some of the unique situations that have been presented here. So I look forward to some of that stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And since we're just still on this page, I'll just ask my question here and then just to add on to it. So this is a highway development strategy for 628 and 16A. Definitely there's areas that have already been developed that's not part of the study, as kind of outlined here in the diagram. But I'm looking at 628 and the properties that are west of 779. That is also on 628, but there's no gray area. Is that not considered potential highway strategy or frontage for businesses, industrial, commercial along the west side of 628 from 779?
Your Worship, to answer your question, that wasn't included in the scope of this project.
Okay, so then that wasn't included in the scope of the project. Then based on what I see and what's on the map here, then we have more than 1,240 acres of land that could be highway development strategy.
Yes, Your Worship, that's right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hansford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you so much, Ms. Lavasser, for your report to us. Of course, sitting on Growth and Commerce, we get to hear this lingo, this language, maybe more often than others, but a couple of thoughts come to my mind. One, I'll direct us to page 147 of 160, which is where you have a couple of different pages with the heading Foreign Direct Investment, Key Findings, and so forth. I believe it was about a year ago that the Liberal government placed a moratorium on any land being sold to foreign investors. So we have this nice section that speaks to this, and that these foreign investors could become part of those who invest in Stony Plain and would see great value in what we have to offer here, but they are not allowed to actually purchase the land. Have you or any of the partners that were utilized to help compile all of this information, did anybody bring up how that can be overcome to allow the development to actually go ahead in Stony Plain? Because one of our big problems used to be a very small number of landowners owned it all. And if they were in the business of land banking instead of land development, that got in the way of Stony Plain being able to move industrial and commercial growth forward, which is very, very important to the town to be able to capitalize on those larger tax dollars, because industrial and commercial bring the most tax dollars into the town coffers so that we can support all the services. Residential development does not support itself. So do you have any response or answer on what can be done about this foreign investment a restriction that we have now from our government? And that's not our provincial government,
Yeah.
by the way.
Do you want to have an answer? Did
Your
you think-
worship, to answer Councillor Hansard's question, I don't have information to share on that. I do know that through the research that was completed for this strategy particularly, the FDI was specific to the purchase of business interests, so the purchase of companies within Alberta or in the region. So not particularly in regards to land purchasing.
Mr. Mayor, it does apply to business as well, I believe.
Yes, thank you. I've done some research on that as well in terms of foreign investment in our communities. So my understanding from reading the paperwork and documents and filling out paperwork myself is that foreign investors are allowed to own property and stuff. They just have to fill out a form, and if it's foreign owned, then there's an extra tax on top of that. So it's a way of the government to impose a tax on foreign investment, which they believe has been the cause of escalating prices within our communities. So that is the kickback to that. So it's not that they cannot, and we're not directing foreign investment to our communities. It's just an additional tax to help alleviate some of the costs, acceleration based on foreign investment. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and big thank you to administration for the presentation this evening. Referring to page 156 in the Investment Readiness Action Plan section, it speaks to vacant land development ready information. Just looking for a little bit of context around this. We heard earlier a little bit around the potential development of ASPs, area structure plans that aren't currently in existence. We heard about potential servicing issues or areas where there aren't servicing already and opportunities to work with developers or bring that servicing to property lines and those type of things. Can you expand along that vacant land development ready information and whether that touches some of those segments or how that connects?
Thank you, Your Worship. To answer Councillor Laurie's question, yes, that is directly related. So as far as when we look at site readiness or investment readiness, it directly responds to areas that are ready to be developed tomorrow. So that includes the area structure plan being completed, the servicing being in place, and all of those that go along with it.
Listen, thank you. And then as a follow-up on that, will the information coming out of that as we create that action plan, will that then give specific targets or specific items that council can then consider as we look at future planning, as we look at future strategic plans and corporate plans of areas that we can invest to help take this plan and move it forward and to start actually putting some of these things in place?
Good.
Your Worship, to answer Councillor Laurie's question, yes, that is exactly what we will be looking at doing, and it'll be looking at all of the vacant areas of land in the community and really having a comprehensive understanding of what it will take to develop those lands, and then having discussions amongst ourselves and with our development partners of how to kind of bring that land up to the standard for more expedited development.
Thank you.
Your Worship, if I may just comment on that one a little bit too. So I think as a economic development officer, I would just to build on all of that, without getting to a conclusion, so to speak, or knowing exactly what that would be, I would expect that there would probably be some aspects of that probably wouldn't meet a threshold of having to get to a council level decision or direction, but some that would. I would expect some would be handled, through some of our administrative planning or administrative authorized costs, and some would not. So kind of both.
Good.
So thank you, Your Worship. I'll just follow up on that from the CAO. So then from what I'm hearing from you is there's a potential that through the administrative planning and through administrative action, some of these things that may be identified in Q2 could potentially even come to fruition or at least be started in 2024 without having to wait for the next iteration of the corporate plan?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, Your Worship, yep.
And then just one further, Your Worship.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Mentioned several times throughout the report is the integration with Edmonton Global and our relationship with Edmonton Global and how this plays in. This is obviously a very key document, a very key strategy. It's going to have some great work coming out of it over the next several years. How are we going to start presenting this information, or how are we going to engage Edmonton Global to ensure that they understand what we have now completed and what we are now going to undertake, so that as they are going out as our partner, they understand our targets, they understand where we're at and what we're attempting to do, so they can kind of match up and marry up the best opportunities they come across with what we're doing here in the town of Stony Plain.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to answer Councillor Lorie's question. Edmonton Global will be a key strategic partner in the ongoing discussions as we work through the action planning process in understanding how we activate on the strategy in the planning part of it. We also engage with Edmonton Global quite regularly, and our plan would be to sit down with their team to actually go through a similar presentation and detail out what some of the findings of the strategy are and where our areas of focus will be moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. I'm glad to hear that this will be presented to them so that they can get an understanding of the work that we've undertaken. Appreciate it, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions for clear understanding? Okay, page is that? Okay, so looking at page 149 and 150, there's the target sectors and then subsectors. So under agri-tech, there is one bullet that says Internet of Things. Go to the next page. Under the subset of manufacturing technologies, it says Industrial Internet of Things. But here we have target sector for logistics, but there is no Internet of Things or logistics Internet of Things. As a layperson, can just describe what Internet of Things are?
Your Worship, to answer your question, Internet of Things would be defined as robotics, drones, anything that is technologically based that would serve that sector. So could be anything of the nature.
So any technological advances in those sectors.
That's right.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question on page 142 in terms of the overall study area. Looking at the gray out sections on Highway 628, the northern part of 628, there's already two area structure plans, the southeast area structure plan and the Tussex area structure plan, that already has, as council has zoned, residential development along 628. Very small pockets of commercial development. So is the intent of the study, and maybe in the future, is to bring back area structure amendments that consider changing a lot of that residential that's adjacent to 628 from residential to commercial?
Your Worship, to answer your question, one of the things that we intend to do is in 2024 is to review the land use bylaw as it relates to the highway development strategy and the target sectors. Part of that will be understanding the corridor, so 628, for example, of what the land uses are currently designated and how we perhaps could make recommendations to amend those to align with what we're finding in the strategy.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for clear understanding? Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the members of the ACDEV committee and also Governments and Commerce Committee to take a look at that. For those that are watching and following along, if you ever have the chance to download the final report, starting on page 105 to 123 of 327, actually is the outline of the pathways of moving forward, of how we our staff intend to use this strategy to further our commercial industrial growth in our communities. Okay, with that, there is a motion that is recommended. Councillor Hansard.
Your worship, I move that town council accept the highway development strategy for information.
Thank you. Members of council, any debate or comments on the motion to accept for information? Okay. See none, definitely appreciate the work, and I like the fact that it's highlighted and what the next steps are in terms of the 2024 work plan. I'd like to see, I look forward to seeing some of the recommendations coming forward. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. All right, number 10 of our agenda, that comes to council discussion. So this is the point in time that members of council are able to bring up issues that they've heard in the community to our staff or to other members of council, and just to share items that may be pressing in the committees that they attend and represent the town in. Councillor Loynes, you're first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing pressing. I just wanted to mention that on Friday, it is our Moonlight Madness with all of our local stores, or majority of our local stores here in town. It's always wonderful to support local, and it's a great opportunity to get some early Christmas present. And as well as on Friday from 5 to 8 at the Family Connection Center, we are celebrating the Métis culture. And that's all for me.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess I should thank you for letting me stand in your place at the Memorial Composite High School's Remembrance Day ceremony Friday. Very well pulled off, I guess is the word. It was a very nice ceremony, and showed the appropriate amount of reverence.
Okay. Thank you for that, and I definitely appreciate you attending. As you know, sometimes I can drive really fast, and other times I can't make it fast enough. So that's why we have the deputy mayor, and definitely appreciate you taking the opportunity and stepping in for me to be the town's representative to lay the wreath on our behalf. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, the showing of community support at the Remembrance Day ceremony this year was fantastic as always. There's nothing that makes me more proud to be pulling into that parking lot and having a hard time finding a space to park. It's a big parking lot, so to be able to have that turnout from our residents and the second to none ceremony that's put on by our Legion, I think is fantastic, and kudos to the town staff for all of their hard work in assisting them in getting that done, and the facility always does a great job, so please pass our thanks on to them. It is the season. Now that we are past Remembrance Day, we go into more of the holiday season, and so I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Kinsman Christmas Hamper Program being kicked off on the 12th there. Again, we've got the hamper program collections going on at many different local businesses. We've got our Red Apple every weekend has their toy drive on there, and then we do have the Smile Cookie campaign on right now, going on, I think it's until the end of this coming weekend, I believe it is, the 13th through. So just encourage everybody to go and grab a box and enjoy a treat, and thanks to those who are out there helping out with that as well. And then again, we have our MAD launch, something that it's a very important event, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving or any level of impaired driving. It's a certain focus around the holiday season, so I know that launch is coming up this Thursday. Just again, highly encourage everybody, enjoy your holiday season, but do so safely and responsibly, and make sure everybody gets home to enjoy theirs as well. So, thank you, Your Worship.
Hey, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'll just echo a lot of the comments that have been going on that have happened in the area. But I just want to bring a highlight to our community. I think we have to remember that there is a multitude of organizations within our community at this time of year need support. There are some that stand out more than others, And I just encourage each and every one of you to remember that for everyone that stands out, there is one in the community that's doing their best to survive. Keep in mind and keep a watch for them as well, because they need your support. The groups that they support within our community need our support. So I encourage you all to keep that in mind. So just, that's it for tonight.
Thank you, and I appreciate those comments again. I would even just kind of challenge that it's not one that's prevalent. There's usually 3 or 4 behind it. So there's a lot of charities and organizations in the community that support the social aspects of the community that make our community whole. And some of those groups don't get the limelight. So just because, as mentioned by Councilor Plechko, there's a few that have the limelight, but make sure you take the opportunity to check out and support the ones that do not have the limelight as some of the other ones do. Councilor Hansard.
Your Worship, thank you for a moment. I wanted to simply say that I was very impressed by Remembrance Day ceremonies. I actually asked the members of the Legion about the bleachers not being there, as we normally have them at the back of the pavilion, and they told me that they were actually able to set up as many chairs to accommodate as many people as if they had the bleachers. And I realized the people at the very back didn't have elevated seats, but it made it way easier to set up for the room and then take down a whole lot more chairs. So that did surprise me, and I didn't mind then that we weren't able to use the bleachers. Want to give a word of praise to the Air Cadets and the Sea Cadets who participated. I always appreciate the young people coming forward, but they were in exceptional form this year, so thank you to the Air and Sea Cadets for their participation in that event. Also, with indulgence, I'd just like to remind people we're in a moment of reprieve. I think God gave these days to me with no snow and ice. But when the snow comes, I want to remind people not to throw their snow off of the sidewalks into the road. That just makes things way more difficult, because many people do pull up in front of their houses, unload their groceries, let children out, and when the snow gets deep, and then you have to wait your turn for the rotation to get to you to clear the roads, it just makes the work an awful lot harder. It makes it more time-consuming. So snow gets piled in your yard, and yes, it may get high, but put it there, not in the roads, and please, everybody, clean your sidewalks so that people can walk and get across the communities, even though we have some snow and ice to deal with.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Hansard, and it's actually a good time to remind residents, as we don't have snow right now, but when we do, make sure they kind of give that some thought. So definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, just for me, again, I have to just echo that this is the season, and it is MAD's Red Ribbon campaign. Again, any accident that occurs with impaired driving is not an accident. It is definitely a result of poor judgment. So this is the season to get together, to celebrate, be with loved ones and friends. Let's make the sober responsibility to make sure that everybody gets home safe, regardless of how much fun you've had. Just make sure you choose wisely and always ask for a ride home. In terms of something that's happening in our community, later this week we'll be having the grand opening of the Regional Collision Reporting Center. As many have seen around, that is a location where residents of the Tri-Region can go and report accidents, where it can be documented and sent off. So it's going to free up some little time for our CMP officers, which then will give us better service. So I'm looking forward to the opening and seeing how that service works in our community. As well, I'm also looking forward to the long service awards with our staff. As members of council remember, it's the time of the year that we celebrate our staff. As we've seen throughout the years, they do an enormous job in supporting us, members of council, to make sure that we achieve our strategic goals and be able to provide the services and amenities that our residents require, need, and demand. Without our staff, we're just as I mentioned before, 7 old people here talking about the weather and complaining about the snow and et cetera. But with our staff, a lot of those concerns and service levels are met because they're there to do it. And having the opportunity to recognize our staff for long service is well worth it. I look forward to seeing members of council and those that are celebrated and awarded for their dedication and commitment to working in the town and making our community safe and better for everyone. Okay, and with that, that comes to the next item, which is close this meeting. We have nothing scheduled tonight. And then to adjournment. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.